Scheduled special meeting of January 25th is in session. Changes to the agenda. Bruce.
I had wanted to add an item on the revisitation of the COPS refinancing per an email correspondence that I initiated with Doug Farman that everybody was copied on, and just wanted to see if we could have a quick conversation about that after the rest of our agenda.
Okay. Any objections? And I think I'd like to add executive session to discuss instructions to negotiations concerning potential land space acquisition, open space acquisition. And Deb, you'll have to give somebody else your card.
I've got a card.
Okay.
I got one too.
Any objections? Then our agenda is approved with those modifications. First item is a discussion about Denver water contract, potential changes, and Jim?
Yes, Council, I thought I would do a very brief overview, especially for our TV audience, of why we're here tonight. I have to be careful. Anytime I talk about water, Charlie Bloston always accuses me of giving a term paper. He's always back in the back of the room going like this because I want to go on about two forks and all that kind of stuff. But for just a very quick overview, many citizens in Littleton may not realize that Littleton has been served by the Denver Water Board since 1970. That was a result of the old municipal system being severely damaged by the huge South Platte flood. In 1965, the municipal system was very badly damaged, and there was a lot of discussion about whether to rebuild that system. There was actually a vote taken in 1970, and when the voters voted to essentially sell the Littleton system to Denver. The cover memo that I sent out gave a little bit of a history, and Charlie will just have to live with me on this. In the 60s and 70s, the Denver Water Board of Commissioners was actively seeking customers, was out selling taps. Many people may or may not know that a large portion of the Denver metro area, not just within the city and county of Denver, is actually served by the Denver system. Even here in the south area, almost the entire southern metropolitan area, all the way in southern Jefferson County through special water districts, all the way to Ken Carroll, all the way to Hogback. There are several 100,000 customers, people who are served by the Denver system through what are called service contracts. Littleton, the municipality of Littleton has its own discrete contract that was entered into in 1970. We are under what's called a total service contract, which means basically for all practical purposes, Denver is the water department for our citizens. It's not, they don't only provide the supply, they do all the maintenance. When you see a water main that needs to be repaired, it's a Denver crew that's out there in one of our city streets fixing it. Some of the other districts do their own maintenance and so forth, and Denver just provides the water, but for us, it's the whole package. Denver essentially, that water system is Littleton's system, and has been so under the terms of the 1970 contract. In the 1980s, with the very, very rapid growth in the metro area, the growth started to outpace the water supply, which led to a multi-year effort to try to pull together a regional water supply solution. There were over 44 districts, counties, cities, big cities like Aurora, Westminster, Arvada participated in a regional effort to put together a coordinated supply program. After several years, a regional reservoir was recommended. It was known as the Two Forks Reservoir. For people who've perhaps moved here more recently, that project was vetoed by the administrator of the EPA in 1990. Those of us who participated in that, and there's some representatives from Denver here tonight, but essentially water supply planning, the rules of the game changed dramatically with that veto in 1990. During the 90s, for those of you who've been here, the northern cities, Thornton, Westminster, went up into northern Colorado, into Weld and Larimer counties, started buying agricultural rights. Aurora went south into the Arkansas Valley, and there was just sort of a distribution of people going every which way to try to meet their water demands. Denver, which until that time had been kind of in the lead position, had quite a bit of discussion with their board and made a very crucial policy decision that the Denver Board of Water Commissioners was not going to be able then to be the total regional supplier for water. The board at that time developed a policy that their first priority was to, obviously, the citizens of City and County of Denver and to those people that they already had existing contracts with that they had done over the years. During the 90s, a new planning process started for Denver. It's called the Integrated Resource Plan, IRP, and really kind of put Denver on a different path. Part of what we're here tonight to do is, during that time and the sort of the revised structure of water supply planning, Denver has been amending many of those contracts, and Patricia, I don't know how many they are, maybe 100 or more?
Well, I think we're down to 66 distributors.
Oh.
Those villages consolidated.
Okay, and I'll introduce these people, and I'm looking off camera here, but over 66 contracts, so you're talking about a lot of contracts serving several 100,000 people, and those have been going through contractual amendments. The Littleton has been one of the last ones to not enter into a contract. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We fully recognize, those of us who have worked on this, that for many years Littleton had a provision, I'll call it the automatic annexation provision, but there was a provision in Littleton's 1970 contract that said if wherever Littleton annexed, then the service contract automatically went with it. For many, many years, and Charlie was here through in fact, Charlie came here the year after the contract was signed. Oh, the year it was signed. And I came here in the early 80s. That provision by city council people and staff members was seen as a very valuable asset. Up until the early 90s, I think that probably was still a valid statement. Some of us on the professional staff have reached different conclusions about that, and we'll talk about that a little later. The purpose, though, tonight got initiated in April of last year. I received a letter from Mr. Chips Berry, who was at that time general manager of the Water Board. I've known Chips for a long, long time, and through all the Two Forks planning. Chips wrote a letter and said, how about Littleton considering amending its contract? We'll talk about the whole situation with reliable water supplies. Mr. Berry, who's unfortunately is deceased now, but did also recognize in his letter, because we'd had many discussions, that he realized that contract was seen as a very valuable asset and anticipated giving directions to his board, or at least information to his staff, that there would need to be some kind of compensation for the citizens of Littleton for amending this contract. In early April of last year then, Suzanne Stard, our city attorney, and I came to the council with Mr. Berry's letter. The council then did authorize Suzanne and I to enter into negotiations with the Denver staff. There's been some drafts going back and forth, but what we have here tonight is a draft amended contract. We'll go through some of the provisions, and we need direction from council as to whether to move forward. Tonight as a study session, so the council cannot take any formal action. If the council would like to proceed with this amendment, it would have to come back to council at a regular meeting, and I think Suzanne is thinking it would be done by resolution in terms of that's how we do contracts. So I'll just hit some very quick highlights. On the policy side, Charlie and I were involved with the kind of the scoping out of the compensation. David Little is the manager of planning and can talk about planning and policy issues. Suzanne, our attorney, and Patricia Wells, the general counsel to the Board of Commissioners, did all the work on the contract itself, and so they can be able to speak to any contract issues for you. The highlights of this are that it puts in place a new service area, a fixed service area for Littleton. However, it does provide some flexibility in that, and I'll just hit these points real quickly. The board would agree to reserve up to 350 acre-feet of water supply for annexed land that is outside of the combined service area, and they'll talk a little bit more about what the combined service area is. Another area of flexibility, for a period of 20 years, the board would agree to make up to 1,200 acre-feet of water available under temporary leases for entities located outside of the combined service areas, so that if there were people who were looking for some sort of 20-year transition or bridge supply, the board has given us, would give the Littleton City Council the flexibility to contemplate that. The board also agrees to pay Littleton $2.1 million in cash, with $1 million being paid yet this year after execution of the contract, and a subsequent $1.1 million cash payment in January of 2012. Another compensation item, and this is something that we had negotiated in full agreement with our staff. The board agrees to pay the cost of converting the existing potable water service for Geneva Park, which is for people, it's basically the park that surrounds the city center. Many public events go on here. To convert that from potable to non-potable water, the estimated cost of doing all that engineering is around $400,000. And we also estimate that conservatively, if we go to non-potable water, we think we would save a conservative $30,000 a year on our water bill. So there's a long-term savings for that. And finally, the board agrees to refund an escrow that the city put up back in the 1980s for administrative cost of managing the Two Forks process, and the estimated value of that's $80,000. So the compensation package that is proposed is a little over about $2,180,000 in cash payments into the city, up to a $400,000 engineering project to convert from potable to non-potable, which would build in long-term water savings and some significant flexibility on potential tap sales outside of the service area if a future city council wanted to do that. I think right there, I'd stop right there. I'd like to just introduce two people here. Patricia Wells, Patty, if you just, Patricia Wells is the general counsel to the Water Board, and she's been a key policy person, very, very involved with policy issues. And then David Little. David is the manager of planning for Denver. And so the next piece here with this brief introduction, David has a kind of a big picture presentation about where Denver is, what's going on with reliable water supply, and why Mr. Berry and the team approached us and really think it's going forward, they believe, and we believe, the staff believes, that amending our contract will best serve the citizens of Littleton into the future. So with that, unless anybody wants to make a quick footnote to anything I've said in my introduction, I'll turn it over to David.
Could I ask a quick
Yes,
question?
ma'am.
The $30,000 a year estimate savings if we convert the Geneva Lake to
Yes.
non-potable, are those rates based on the 2011 water rates, or is it projected out?
Dr. Cole is asking the basis for the $30,000 estimate. Is that based on 2011 rates? Is that a ballpark?
We used the
Charlie
2010.
Boston, the Director of Public Services.
We used the 2010 water rates to calculate the $30,000 savings. And one correction to what Jim has said is that the property that would be served by non-potable water would be this entire block. It would be the city center lawn from Prince to Rio Grande, Berry to Crestline.
Thank you, Charlie.
About
Yes,
20
essentially not only the park, but the entire city campus.
It's about 20 acres, and we based it on last year's water rates.
So that really is conservative based on what we've seen happening with water rates
Yes, ma'am.
even in the last 5 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But Charlie, not the drinking fountains. Pardon? Not the drinking fountains.
Yeah.
And frankly, the savings would have been more if you guys hadn't put all those parking lots in.
Now that we've got the editorial comments on,
Well, the other question for David is recognizing that your surname is rather significant for the city. Any relation?
I don't think so.
Here we
But if that will help my presentation today, I'll say there's something out there somewhere.
claim patronage. David Little, Manager of Planning for the Denver Water Department.
Well, good evening. Thanks for having us tonight. And before I get started, my dentist is watching tonight, so, the crown's holding up pretty good. We can't see the State of the Union address tonight, so tonight I'm bringing you the state of your water provider, which is Denver Water, and we are your water provider. And I'm going to go over some of the things that Jim talked about in a little more detail. But what I want to show you today is from the perspective of a planner, because I'm a planner, what some of the things that we're seeing and how we've changed our thinking over the years. So I have about 30 minutes of slides, and I encourage questions as I go along, so that if you see something that you want to talk to me about now or later, just bring it up. First of all, just so you know from our perspective who we think we are and some of the interesting statistics, we're an independent agency. We were established by the Denver City Charter. We're fully funded by water rates and our tap fees, SDCs. We have no tax base, and we're not for profit. So we're truly in just the service business, and we're the largest utility in the state of Colorado, and in essence in the region. I always find this kind of fascinating. We have 3,000 miles, more than 3,000 miles of pipe, 22 pump stations, 34 underground reservoirs, more than 19,000 fire hydrants. And we draw water off of more than 4,000 square miles of watersheds. We have about 99% of our source water that we get is all by gravity, which is unusual for water utilities, which saves pumping costs and carbon footprint. And we have 10 storage reservoirs up in the mountains for about half a million acre feet, which is a lot of water. This is our area that we impact and influence. This is our service area in gray here. We have 3 treated water plants, our Moffett plant, our Marston plant, and our Foothills plant, and then we have one recycle plant where we take water down it from Metro, where some of our reusable effluent comes, and recycle it back into our system for processed water and irrigation purposes. This is our South Platte collection system. We have 3 reservoirs: Antero Reservoir, 11-Mile Reservoir, Spinney is Aurora's Reservoir, and Cheeseman Reservoir and Strontia Springs Reservoir. I'm going to talk about Strontia Springs in a second, but this is a critical point here because it is what we call the choke point for not only our South Platte system, but also our Blue River system, which includes Dillon Reservoir, 254,000 acre-foot of storage. That's the biggest amount of storage that we have available, and that's on the west slope. We divert that water through the Continental Divide, and the Roberts Tunnel put it in the North Fork. This area right here, all the water from these 2 systems have to go through this area. It's about 80% of our water supply goes through this one choke point and serves our 2 treatment plants, Foothills and Marston. That also is about the location of the Two Forks site that we were talking about before. And the reason it was called Two Forks is because it dammed the North Fork and the South Fork. So it's just a little geography. And then we have the north end of our system, which serves the Moffett project, or the Moffett collection or treatment plant, and we divert water up around Granby for that and bring it over the east slope. So that gives you some of the geography of where we divert water. Oh, one more piece here. This is the Continental Divide. And all the water that we divert from the left side of the Continental Divide is tributary to the Pacific Ocean, the Colorado River, and everything we divert from the right side of the Continental Divide is tributary to the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the South Platte. And that's significant because of this graphic. The red line is, again, the Continental Divide, and all the population in the state, or the majority of the population of the state, is right here, and all the water is right here. So that sets us up for some controversy in the ability to get water from the west slope to the east slope. And we've been very successful in the past, and we're becoming less successful as time goes on. Two Forks was a classic example. That's the first time that Denver has tried to take water off the western slope, and we were stopped. Speaking of Two Forks, as Jim said, it was a regional effort. The veto changed everything. The board's new path statement, in essence, this is where the board started to say, you know, we're not going to be the regional water provider any longer. Up to this point, we had designs on being the regional water provider for the entire Denver metropolitan area. But this showed us that we had limitations. Up until this point, the way we did planning at Denver Water is we had a list of water supply projects, and as we needed more water supply, we just put on one of those projects. And we worked off of this list. And you can see, if you look at the history, you can see us doing that. The Gross Reservoir Project, 1954. Dillon Reservoir, Roberts Tunnel, 1964. Strontia Springs, Foothills Treatment Plant, 1979. Two Forks, 80s and 90s. That stopped. No longer could we plan that way. So as Jim also said, and you did a very good summary, Jim, so hopefully this isn't too redundant, we had to look for a new way to plan. And we went out and we captured a technique called integrated resource planning from the electric utilities. When we first implemented this new technique, it took us about 4 years to do it, and we issued a report in 1997, and we were one of the first water utilities in the United States to use this technique. And these are some of the results that came out of it, and more recent conversations with our board. We're looking at a three-prong approach. I call it the three-legged milk stool. It's aggressive conservation, it's recycling of water so that we use water to the extent we can over and over again, and new supply development. So we need all three of those components. In our conservation efforts, use only what you need. People know that pretty well. We're proud of that. We have lots of requests from people across the country that want to use that same statement to get people to save water. So far, we haven't allowed them to do that. Our goal is very aggressive, 22% savings by 2016. To date, we've made about 19% of that. This is an interesting statistic. In 2007, the Colorado Water Conservation Board said that there was about $11 million spent on conservation. Of that $11 million, Denver spent $8 million. That's about 70% of the total that was spent, and we serve about 25% of the population of the state. Yes, sir.
David, when you talk about water use reduction, are you talking about gross use? Are you talking about per capita use?
Per capita use. And it's, per capita is not a really good metric for us to use because per capita use is pretty accurate if you're just looking at a residential community, but if you're looking at our service area, per capita use with DIA and all the downtown and industry that we have in the metropolitan area, it's not a really good indicator because all it is the total amount of water used by all those entities divided by the number of people that live here. So, for example, our per capita use with DIA and other industries is probably higher, and it is higher than Aurora, which is basically more of a bedroom community. So, but it is by per capita.
Not to mention Pepsi.
Pepsi, right?
So,
Do you have numbers on the per capita, if you broke it out for residential?
We do have those numbers, yes.
But
We're very comparable to Aurora, and we're better than many utilities in the state of
you
Colorado.
can't whip out a number on us.
I can get that for you. It's in the order of 130 gallons per capita per day.
Yeah, but I meant the reduction.
Oh, the reduction?
Yeah.
No, I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but I'll get them for you.
But maybe both, including what you started to give. That would be great.
You betcha. I'll get you those numbers. And then in the future, as we move in the future, we're not stopped. We're not finished with conservation. We're going to try to get more conservation out of our system. And then our water recycling, we're very proud of that also. Our goal is by 2020 to have that project completed, and we're doing it in an incremental approach so that we don't spend a large amount of money in a single year. We're also seeking a diverse customer base. Right now, the primary customer base, the customers that we're serving now are primarily irrigation, so that's summer with a lot of peaking. We're trying to diversify that into some winter use so that we don't have so much peaking on our system. Total amount's about 17,500 acre feet. We'll be spending about $350 million by the time we're done, and we'll have a plan of about 45 million gallons a day. So it's a very aggressive recycling project. And anytime you go around the metro area and you see purple pipe, that's us. That's the color of the pipe that we put in the ground if it's recycled water. And if it's blue pipe, that's potable water. In the 1997 resource statement, the board made a lot of statements. These are just a few that I thought I'd highlight. And as I mentioned before, it constituted a major policy declaration. But this is where they started, where they defined their service area. And they said, you know, we are getting nervous about our ability to serve our customers if we continually grow our service area. So let's confine our service area and focus our attention on serving the customers within that service area so we can assure we can continue to provide quality service for those customers. There's a lot of other components in here. For example, the last one they declared that any structural projects on the West Slope should be done cooperatively. So the era of us just going out and forcing our way into the West Slope was over. They recognized that. These are the numbers that we're using going into our new IRP, which I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. Existing supply is about 345,000 acre feet, and you can see the demand line is coming up, and we're thinking it's going to cross the existing supply in about 2016. Now, we think that's going to go out a little bit once we finish our new IRP because we'll have more conservation values to put into there. But it's not going to go out a lot further. So we're getting close to our supply. One thing in here I wanted to mention is we report out 345,000 acre feet. That's a calculated number. Some people put too much weight on that. That number is only as good as the assumptions that are in the calculation, and we have a lot of assumptions, and I'm going to touch on some of those. The board also decided that there's so much uncertainty out there that they want to reserve some water that they're not going to sell taps on. So our system, based upon all the assumptions we use, will produce about 375,000 acre feet. But we only report out that we have available for selling of taps for 345,000. We're saving a little less than 10% as a safety factor, or a strategic water reserve, we call it. And that's for all the uncertainties that we have and all the assumptions that we make when we calculate these numbers. You don't want to be right up against the limit and figure out that you've calculated wrong, and then you don't have enough water supply. So we carry that strategic water reserve. And the balanced approach, as I mentioned before, is critical for us. System refinements is like lining ditches or capturing fish flows that we're obligated to release, bringing them back into our system and getting a second use out of them. Just trying to improve the efficiency, water use efficiency of our system. All these are important because we can't meet our needs without all of them. This is probably one of the most telling statements that came out of the 1997 Board Resource Statement. And I'm going to, it's important because I'm going to reference it later on, and I'm going to actually read it. The board has adequate water resources and options, including opportunities for conservation, reuse, and the development of its water rights to fulfill its obligations to provide service for the combined service area through build-out. I want to point out a couple things. One, it says the board has adequate water resources. That's a very comforting thought in 1997. And it also says through build-out, which means, in essence, forever, wherever we end up. That's where we were in 1997, as late as 1997. And that generated the concept of firm yield. So when we say we have 345,000 acre-feet of water supply, what we're saying is, then we were saying, and that's firm yield. Well, firm, to a lot of people, means it's always there, and there's no wiggle room. That's the way we used to think in 1997. But that's changing. So the board in 2007 said it's time to go back and revisit our IRP. And we started down the process of updating the IRP, and we thought we were going to get into updating the cost figures and updating the yield numbers. And the more we got into it, the more we realized that there was a significant amount of things that changed since the 1997 IRP. And we couldn't just update the IRP. We had to completely redo it. So the board set us, in 2007, set us on a path to completely update the IRP and look at all the risks that we're facing now. And our goal is to have it done this year, 2011. So you're going to see some information that we've just presented to the board, and this is the first time it's been presented out in the public. Some of the things that changed, one of the obvious, this is Dillon Reservoir, got down to 43% during the drought, our biggest reservoir. We were in the 30s in our total reservoir content. That scared us. We didn't see that coming. We started to identify vulnerabilities. During the drought, the world burnt up on us. Bill Owen said that Colorado's on fire, which the recreation people and the tourist people said, don't say that, don't say that. But this is above our reservoir, so it was a catastrophic event for us. The Hayman Fire, the Buffalo Creek Fire. This is what it looked like in Strontian Springs Reservoir. Remember that one single point that 80% of our water comes from? This is what happened after the runoff. So all of a sudden we have 80% of our water supply at risk because of those events. These are the vulnerabilities that we started to explore and try to figure out how we can address them as we move into the future. And then there's everyone's favorite, climate change. What do you do with climate change? And if you look at this stuff, you can scare yourself. I'm going to show you a little bit of the things that we're starting to think about. These green dots and these orange dots, and those of you that are colorblind, the green ones are diamonds and the orange ones are squares. Well, so let's start with the green ones. That's for 2040, and each dot represents a climate change projection by a model. So all these different dots are all different climate change projections by different models. That's how many climate models are out there projecting what's going to be going on. There's even more than this. These are the ones that we captured. So you have this suite of climate change models projecting what's going to happen in the future for 2040 and 2070. The other thing I want to point out is this is central Colorado watersheds. So this is specific to our watersheds. If you look at these same suite of climate models and you look at the Pacific Northwest, what they'll all pretty much agree on is it's going to get hotter and it's going to get wetter. Yeah.
Greater precipitation.
But if you look at the Pacific Northwest, they pretty much agree that it's going to get hotter and wetter. If you look at the Southwest, the desert Southwest, they pretty much agree it's It's going to get hotter and drier. In our area, they pretty much agree it's going to get hotter, but as Patty pointed out, there's a zero line. As a planner, what would you say precipitation is going to do? I can't say it's going to get wetter. I can't say it's going to get drier. So we don't assume it's going to get wetter or drier because the science isn't precise enough yet to separate this out.
It's pretty firm, though, that it's going to do something one way or the...
It's going to get wet. It's going to get
gonna
hotter.
The same.
It's not going to be the same. That projection isn't very strong, right?
Well, the zero line, there's a lot of them that lay right around the zero line.
But most of them aren't.
Something's going to happen.
David?
Yes.
With that, though, isn't, not being the, a hydraulic engineer at all in taking a look at this, as the temperature might be warmer, doesn't that change the type of precipitation we get? And a lot of what we look at is snowpack rather than rain.
Yep. In fact, I'm going to show you that in the next slide.
Oh,
Thank you for the lead-in. Good question. So we know it's going to get warmer. At least they're all telling us that we're going to get warmer, so that's fair for us to assume it's going to get warmer. So what and if you looked at these, if you looked at the green ones, you'd say, well, maybe we ought to look at a 4-degree increase in temperature. That might be a reasonable look. And if you look at a 27, maybe a 6-degree increase. We don't want to scare ourselves that much. So we looked at a 2-degree change in temperature to see what it would do for our system, and no change in precipitation. And this is the results. A 2-degree increase in temperature reduces our supply about 24,000 acre-feet. The reason it reduces our supply is because it's going to be warmer, and in our watersheds, the vegetation there is going to be capturing and holding back more of the water that falls on it, whether it's rain or snow, and it's not going to get to the stream. So that's about 24,000 acre-feet of the water supply that we've been counting on could be gone. And the use by our customers is going to increase. Because it's warmer, they're going to have to irrigate more to maintain their gardens, to maintain their lawns, and to maintain the trees. This is 2040. So that's 21,000 acre-foot increase in demand. So this is the perfect storm. Supply goes down, demand goes up. And in this instance, and remember, that's a 2-degree increase in temperature. Some would argue we should look at a 4-degree increase in temperature in the green and a 6-degree there. So right there we have 45,000 acre-feet of water supply need or loss that we need to figure out what to do about. Another big thing that's starting to play is called the Colorado River Compact Call. And there's a compact on the Colorado River that apportions the flows of the Colorado River among the 7 basin states. And people are now starting to talk about the Colorado River Compact Call, not if it's going to happen, but when it's going to happen. And there's some concern that it could happen within the next 5 or 8 years, depending on how Lake Mead is, although we're getting a great snowpack this year, which is hopeful, but it all depends on Lake Mead and Lake Powell. The compact was entered into in 1922, and if a compact call comes on, everyone that's junior to 1922 can't divert. All of our water supply on the western slope is junior to 1922. So, and about half of our water supply, more than half of our water supply, comes from the west slope. Compact call comes on, that nice 345,000 acre feet that we used to call firm yield. We could lose 180,000 of it in a moment's notice, just by that call coming on. There's also another complicating factor. The water we bring over from the Colorado River, we can use over and over and over again. And that's the water we use to serve our recycling plant. And we also use it for other purposes. Well, if it's not coming across the Continental Divide for us to use it the first time and subsequent times, we don't get to use it. That's additional water supply that we could lose. We think that's about 30,000 acre feet. This is actually a depressing story. but I'm going to end on a high note. You're looking in the mind of a planner, and that's never a pretty thing. Our existing water supply, our river exchanges, we're being challenged in court on our gravel pits and river exchanges. Sometimes we win these, sometimes we lose them. We figure we have about 20,000 acre-feet at risk. Green Mountain Reservoir Administration. Green Mountain Reservoir is a Bureau of Reclamation project. It's on the Blue River. It's downstream of Dillon, and it's senior to Dillon. And one day, the state engineer woke up, I think, and decided that the administration of Green Mountain had to change, and they changed the administration on us over the way it had been administered historically, and all of a sudden we lost 3,000 acre-feet, just by a change in administration. And we're fighting that. We're trying to, and we're making good progress, and we're going to get that one resolved, we hope. Future water supplies. Eagle Piney Project, which was one of the big ones that we had in our back pocket, we lost it. As part of a water court case that we were pretty sure we were going to lose, so we negotiated an agreement to give up part of it, 100,000 acre-feet, so we could preserve another part of it. But it's an indication of how we're being whittled away. That's on the west slope, that's in the Vail Valley, how we're being whittled away on our future options. Even our South Platte water rights are at risk because we're constantly being challenged in court. Build out, another wonderful concept. We no longer are thinking about build out, we're thinking about build up. This is where Denver is. Denver's service area, our service area, including Littleton, 3,000 people per square mile. It's not beyond the realm of imagination that we could get to the St. Louis density or even the Providence density. That's 3 times the density that we have right now. If we're going to continue to have population growth and we're going to continue to have transit-oriented growth, that's possible. So what do you plan for? How do you plan for? No longer do we have an end point. It just continues to get more and more if we don't deal with the population issue. And there's no stomach now, and I don't think there will be in the future to deal with the population issue. So that statement that was very comforting in 1997, I think if the board had to write that statement today and for their new IRP, they would say, the board will be challenged to develop adequate water resources to provide service for a fixed combined service area because of all the unknowns, all the uncertainties we're facing. And firm yield is dead. We're not talking about firm yield anymore. Now it's the water supply that our system will develop under this whole list of assumptions. If one of them are not right, we won't be able to develop that water. We won't be able to deliver that water. Yes, sir.
There's been talk of increasing the capacity of Chatfield Reservoir.
Yes, sir.
12 feet, and I can't remember exactly how many acre feet that would give us, but is that your project, this Denver Water, or where is that?
It's not our project.
It's not your project.
It's downstream of all our diversion facilities. So the only way we get that water back into our system is to build some pretty big pump facilities. And we do use Chatfield. The water that is in Chatfield is our water. It's your water. We use it for exchanging upstream and to meeting downstream needs. So we already are using Chatfield, but that additional part that's being looked at now, that's a group of people in the metro area are looking at, like Douglas County entities in Aurora, some downstream entities. So this is our new integrated resource plan. No longer can we look at a single future, because one thing that you learn real quick when you become a planner is you're always wrong. We're trying to project the future, and you can't project the future, or I wouldn't be here. So now we're going to look at multiple futures, because we know that just looking at the way what has happened in history is not a good indicator of what's going to happen in the future. Our goal with this process is to hopefully find this sweet spot. We call it the sweet spot. On a near-term strategy, if you have some commonality of all these futures, think of this rolled out 2030, 2040 in time. If you can find common things that you could do that would work well, no matter what future path you're on, then you have a leg up, because you can go do those things, install them, and you won't be wasting money. And it gives you time to see the future clearer as you move into the future, and see whether you're starting off on one of these other paths, so that you can make more informed decisions and you don't waste money. That's the theory of the scenario planning that we're doing now, which is a new approach that we, again, are blazing the trail on the water utility area. These are the planning futures. One of the things that you need to recognize about these futures that we're looking at is these are plausible futures, but we're not predicting the future. It's to stress our thinking of what could happen. So we try to get a broad group of them. The traditional future is what we've done in the past. Water quality rules. In this instance, people would be so particular about their water quality that we may not be able to use certain water sources that are of lower water quality, and other things that we may need to think about. Here's the climate change one, looking at climate change. Economic woes. We actually designed this before we went into the downturn that we're in right now. But this is much deeper. This is an energy crisis that would keep people from coming to this area. And the green revolution, where more environmental concerns out there, more in-stream flows that would be required to release, impacting our water supply. So now we start looking at gaps that vary, that we need to meet in the future. And this isn't to the end of our plan. This isn't to the end point. This is just till 2050. And they're going to continue to grow. And they vary. Sometimes your supply goes down, as I talked about in the climate change scenarios, and the demands increase because of population growth or whatever. And it's not beyond the realm of possibility to assume that a few of these may lay on top of each other. And then you start getting this kind of stuff. So the pink is the target for the next 50 years. That's a lot of water. Frankly, we don't know where we're going to get it. We think we have some good ideas and some good possibilities. Here's one interesting thing that the board's going to start looking at is the reliability of our system. One way to serve more customers with the same amount of water supply is you reduce the reliability of your water supply. It's a pretty simple concept, but it also has lots of ramifications. And the way we test the reliability of our system is how frequently and how severe do we have to put restrictions on our customers, which is a critical thing. That's the test. In wet years, you have all the water in the world. In dry years is when you test your system to see how reliable it is. And how big of a strategic water reserve should you have for all these uncertainties? All this plays into the way you're going to look at the future. We use tree ring data now in our model to try to figure out long-term records. So we're back 374 years to get some of these answers. These are the different levels of restrictions that we look at as we move into a drought. We go into a drought warning, let you know that there's a drought, looks like there's a drought coming, start to think about it, start to try to save more water. This is above and beyond our conservation program. This is emergency issues. Then if it's still severe enough, we start to stress trees and lawns. If this happens 2 years in a row, you start to lose some lawns and you start to really damage trees. If it gets worse, we're into banning lawn watering. What that means is your lawn's going to go away. And what tends to happen is you go 1 year stressing trees and lawns, and then the second year of a bad drought, you'd have to ban lawn watering. Lawns are gone. Whether we can save the trees or not, we would certainly try, but most of the trees are watered by lawn watering. So that's a huge issue. And then your backup is always, you ban all outdoor water. All the green is gone. And you just use rationed indoor water. This is the type of thinking that we have to do now with all that uncertainty out there. And this is what our modeling is showing us. If we sell this much water, put that many customers on, this is how often we would be doing each one of these. Is that the right amount? That's where we're at right now, assuming all our assumptions are correct. you may be nervous enough about the future that you don't want to put that many customers on. You don't want to sell 345,000 acre feet of water. You only want to sell 310,000 acre feet of water because you want to increase the reliability of your system, and you want to have a little bit in reserve. That's not a lot of water. That's 30,000 acre feet, 35,000 acre feet. It's not a lot of water in the scheme of things. But look how it changes the reliability of the system. It increases the reliability considerably. But if we can't get the water supplies, or the population grows too fast, or it gets too large for us, the board's going to have to consider adding more customers to the same water supply. And then the reliability starts to go down. And is 6 years where you ban outdoor lawn watering in 374 years too much? I don't know the answer to these questions, but these are the questions that the board's going to have to wrestle with. And the bigger the demand is that we have to serve, the more likely it is that we're going to have to start reducing the reliability of our system, which will impact all our customers, not just Littleton, but all our customers. Moffett Collection System project. This is one of the projects that we were sure we could get done because this is what the environmental community told us that they would approve during the Two Forks veto process. This is the enlargement of a small reservoir up in Boulder County. And so we went forward with that, and we're trying to get an additional 18,000 acre feet out of this project, and now some in the environmental community are fighting us every step of the way because no longer is this acceptable to them. This diverts water off the West Slope. West Slope is a no-no for additional water supply. So we think we're going to get through this. We have some good mitigation package put together. In fact, the board has gone so far as to develop an enhancement package for the environment out there, which is a stellar package that I'd be happy to talk to anyone about if you'd like me to talk to you about it later. But it's pretty amazing to see how our board has gone from exploiting the resource to the sustainability effort of using the resource but making the environment as good or better than when we diverted the water. So that's I'm proud of that. And this is Colorado again. Continental Divide, South Platte River, Arkansas River, Rio Grande, Colorado River going that way with its tributaries. The first 50 years of Denver's existence, we developed our water supplies in the South Platte. The second 50 years, we went to the West Slope and developed those. We've about exhausted our ability to go to the West Slope for appropriate reasons. What's left is this green stuff, and that's irrigated agriculture. This is Denver's combined service area. And the way we're starting to think about it is our future water supply is going to come from taking water away from vegetation. It's going to either be taking water away from the vegetation that you have in your yards and your gardens and in your parkways, or it's going to be taking water away from vegetation that is corn, soybeans, and beets. That's where our next water supply is. There's all kinds of issues associated with it. The more water we bring up from this area, it's a lower quality water. Every drop has to be pumped and pumped long distances, and it has to be treated at a very high standard. Very costly. But this is what we have left. And to the extent that we need to move into these lower quality sources is going to be directly related to what our future demands are and what future demands we need to meet. And that's going to be based upon what build-up is going to be and whether or not we can contain our combined service area to the geographic extent we have right now. If we can't do that, then we're going to be moving into the agricultural community in a much more aggressive way, and we'll have to look at the way we're going to help looking at our reliability of our system, because we have to continue to serve water for safety purposes and fire flows and things like that. So there you just got a picture of my nightmares. Now, having said all that, our board is really aggressive at looking at ways to get through these and to ameliorate the issues. Colorado River Compact, for example, our new CEO, Jim Lockhead, is a key player in those discussions, and we're looking for ways through water banks and other ways to protect ourselves against the compact call. So every one of these things that I've identified as a horror. We have plans in place to try to reduce the risks they would cause to us, but there's still a considerable amount of risks that we're faced with. So that concludes my prepared remarks. I'll answer any questions you have. Yes, sir.
David, you mentioned that the water that currently can be taken from the western slope, Colorado River water, I think was how you referred to it, is that we can use that again and again and again and again. Once we get it here, recognizing that not only does Denver, but Littleton and in our partnership with Englewood have an opportunity to process water again and again and again and again. Once we get it here, what's to keep us from using that again and again, more ad infinitum rather than letting it go?
Nothing. Money. The Bi-City plant, for example, we have a lot of our reusable effluent comes back to that plant. We're using it now. What we do is called a river exchange using that, and we tag an acre-foot of water coming out of the Bi-City plant that's reusable to go to a downstream water right that's calling out our upstream reservoirs, and we hold an acre-foot up in our upstream reservoirs. So we are cycling it. And our recycle plant is another one. The third one is we're in the process of building 30,000 acre-foot of gravel pit storage downstream at Denver to capture our reusable effluent and allow us to use it more. But there's still more that we haven't managed. And that's what we're looking at with the WISE project. Some of you have heard about the WISE project. We're trying to take that, the remainder of our unused reusable effluent that we can't manage with our existing system or our planned system and capture it through Aurora's Prairie Waters project and bring it back and use it in Douglas County in a way that gets them off their wells. Because one of the biggest risks Denver Water faces is that Douglas County, the water users in Douglas County, if they don't solve that water problem, they're on non-tributary groundwater, that's going to go away someday. And that day is coming towards us. We're concerned that that demand in Douglas County then would, through the state legislature or some other mechanism, would become our responsibility. Yes, sir.
I'm going to try in layman's terms.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
The only thing that prevents us from holding on and reusing and reusing and reusing, because once it gets here, I mean, that supply could conceivably become immense over time, is the fact that it's like we're trying to hold it in our hands and it's sand and it's just flowing through the system. We're not able to hold enough. The only way we could do that is if we somehow found a way to capture it more.
Yeah, I wanted to say a word about reusable water. Essentially, in our system, the water that we can reuse is Blue River water at the present time. So it's water that comes through the Roberts Tunnel from Dillon. On the one hand, the West Slope wants us to leave as much water as possible in Dillon for recreation and aesthetics. And on the other hand, once it's over here, they want us to reuse it to the maximum amount so that we don't bring more over. Almost all of our South Platte water is not reusable. So, as David said, what we do is this very elaborate calculation, and so of the water going into the Bi-City plant, we calculate how much comes from Littleton, which is a customer of ours, and what's from Englewood, which isn't a customer of ours, and of the Littleton water, how much of that came through the Roberts Tunnel and is therefore reusable, and so how much of the effluent coming out of the plant are we entitled to use again. Same thing with Metro wastewater. But you're right, we can't just hold it in another big reservoir. So we capture it, we reuse it by exchange. That's what the gravel pits that we're constructing, as David said, the 30,000 acre feet, that's to store reusable water. So we can, in fact, use it in various ways. But it's a really complex issue, and it's not going to solve our problem completely. So,
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm showing I'm going to really be naive here, which is currently the Bi-City plant's only operating at about 50% of capacity. And it sounds like it gets tagged. We have a chance to use a little bit more. If it were closer to being used at capacity, Does that help?
Well, let me address that a couple ways. First of all, just
It depends.
so you know, for every acre foot of reusable water we bring across, we can get about 2.5 acre feet of use out of it. So that's just a number that we think about. Capacity.
Is that how much we, can kind of use in our hands and then eventually the sand goes through?
Yeah, you can't capture it all, but that's a rule of thumb that we use in thinking about this. Capacity is not an issue for us. You could have, I don't know how much capacity is in there, 10 million gallons a day or something like that.
Around about 25 minutes.
25 million gallons a day. The capacity is not the issue. It's how much water supply of Blue River water we put through there. And if you put 25 million gallons a day through South Platte water, it does no good for us. So it's all based upon how much we serve and how much of the water is from the Blue River. So I can't help you with that capacity issue. I know that's a big issue for you guys, unless there's other water sources that we could get in there that are reusable.
The issue is how much of the water that went into the Foothills treatment plant, how much of that came from the South Platte, and how much of that came from the Blue River? Because one's reusable and the other one isn't.
So it's a big accounting,
elaborate. Yeah, very
it's a
elaborate.
big accounting issue.
I just heard that everything that goes into the plant comes from the Blue River.
No, state engineer doesn't buy that.
Oh, jeez.
So.
What we do, the Blue River water, we tend to protect the western slope and to protect the environment. We bring Blue River water across when we need it. And when we need it is when it's dry. So what you'll see in our system when you look at the reusable effluent files that and the records, in the wetter years and the average years, we have very little reusable effluent. And in the dry years, we have more than we can deal with. So one of our challenges, because that's when we're bringing all the water over from the western slope. And in the wet years, we're using our South Platte sources. So what you see, one of the challenges is, since all the reusable effluent is in the dry years, how do you serve a demand that is available not only in the dry years, but in wet and average years too? So that's some of the challenges we're dealing with. But we're coming up with some creative ways.
Maybe I missed it, but explain, you said the Blue River is the only water that's reusable. Mm-hmm. And why is that?
Because it is what's known as foreign water. It's imported into the basin, and therefore, by operation of water law, it doesn't belong to the river.
Is that because people downstream on the river have a claim to the water?
Because they don't have a claim
No, the
to
Blue
the
River, but they
imported
do to the
water.
South
Right,
Platte.
yes, yes. And these days, when you go to get a decree, you would always get a decree for reusable water. But our South Platte water rights are from the late 1800s, and just people didn't think you needed it. So we don't have decrees that say we can reuse our South Platte water. But if you import it, the river, it doesn't belong to the South Platte, and therefore we can reuse it to.
We also get a lot of reusable water off this part of this is the Blue River system right here. Comes to the Roberts Tunnel, and this is what we're talking about, because this is the Blue River. That's where the majority of our reusable water comes from. But we also import a tremendous amount of water, 80,000 acre feet, off the Moffett system. This gives you an indication. What I'm going to say next is going to give you a feel for how how it changes as you go through time. We had all this water coming across from the Moffett system, and there's this group of ditches down here called consolidated ditches. And in 1940, this reusable effluent that we had was so valueless to us. We entered into an agreement with them. It's called the 1940 agreement, and we agreed to not reuse any of the water that we divert off the Moffett system. Because in 1940, the reuse of effluent was not even thought of. We've tried to get out of that contract twice because it's a tremendous amount of water, and we lost both times in court. So now we're going to try to negotiate with them, because a lot of the water that we bring from the Moffett system is water they don't even use. It comes across in the wintertime. These are irrigators. They don't even need it. So there's a deal there. So we're hoping to expand the amount of reusable effluent that we can use. Yes, sir.
Isn't there a possible similar deal with that
Yes. That's the CBT project, the Colorado Big Thompson project. It's a Bureau of Rec project. All the water that comes through the Adams Tunnel is reusable. And if you look at the taxing district for the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District, now they call themselves Northern Water, their taxing district goes all the way down to South Platte. And the reason that is because they bring it across, it's used once in the Loveland, Greeley area, Fort Collins area, then the return flows are used further downstream, and then the return flows are used further downstream yet. So they account for all that. Yeah, that's a tremendous amount of water.
And there's no thing like there is with
The CBT, well, winter versus summer, the CBT project is a supplemental water supply for the agricultural community municipalities up north, but they bring water across every year. They bring more across in dry years, just like we do, but they bring water every year. So they have a source of reuse water every year.
But they would also have more, they would bring more over in the summer
Yes,
during the
more in the
irrigation
summer.
season.
But that,
Okay.
and that's shifting, because this was an irrigation, an agricultural project. Now about 50% of that water from CBT goes for municipalities. So they're starting to shift the use of that water.
So, council, I think David's given you a good overview of, and you got a memo, the cover memo, you have a copy of the contract, but I think David's given you a big picture of why the certainty of the service area and these planning uncertainties of reliable supply is why Denver has been out trying to amend these contracts so that they have a more defined accountability issue of reliability and what they have to do with their contracts. So I think that's really sort of the driver behind these. As we've pointed out, and I just hit the highlights, Patricia and Suzanne can certainly talk about it. I think if I had to describe the proposed contract is Denver, as you've seen, their driver is that certainty to try to help with their planning, their reliability. But we think that we've negotiated, Suzanne and I, some flexibility that we heard from council members that was important for Littleton. So there are provisions in this contract, I think, that are unique, that give future city councils some flexibility. The Denver people heard us about that, we think, and that there is a very positive contribution compensation package in there in the matter of cash payments and some improvements to our system. So I don't know, Suzanne or Patricia, you're the guys that really authored the contract. If you have specific details, other contract issues that you'd like to comment about.
Yeah, if I could, the reason we went about changing our contracts, as Jim mentioned, you'll see on the top line, it says 1993 form of contract. We, as Dave mentioned, back before Two Forks, we had always thought that there was enough, there'd just never be any end to the amount of water that we could develop and provide. And so there was no service area. We just kind of added people to the system, and that was fine because we made money off the deal and we had plenty of water. When Two Forks got vetoed, then the board had to reassess, and they said, we have to quantify our obligations. We need to not be responsible to the world at large. And so the combined service area was created in 1993 by virtue of these new form contracts. It's a little hard to call them new since it's now 2011. But about 95% of all our accounts are now covered under these new contracts which create the service area. So it was very important. We couldn't have done the 1996 Integrated Resource Plan if we didn't have a service area to plan for. So as David has demonstrated to the nth degree, it's even worse now. There's more risk, but we believe that by having the service area and knowing what that is and creating a promise to the people in our service area that we will, by golly, figure out how to get the water. But the old contract that Littleton has with the sort of, we can go anywhere and Denver Water will provide the water, isn't really factually true. That may have been what it said, but what we're trying to point out is that would be a promise that we probably couldn't keep. So that's why it was important to us as your water provider, to try to make promises about water supply that we believe we can keep. The issue of how much water we can provide has no effect whatsoever on Littleton's sovereign ability to annex and do whatever you want to do with land use. The issue is, as your water provider, what can we realistically promise going forward? And any amount of water wherever is just not realistic. So I think that was really, so we've come through iterations. We used to not even have a service area. Now we have one. Just as another sort of aside, that service area has helped us come to resolution, just about, with the West Slope, who has argued with us about the water we take from the Blue River. In particular, we have a Blue River decree, it's called, that it controls how we get that reusable water over here. And having a service area has helped us reach a resolution with them on, we're going to be able to resolve our ancient disputes on the Blue River decree, we believe. So having a service area has been very useful in our ability to make peace with everybody. It also has let Douglas County know, for example, that they're not going to be in the service area, that we're not going to undertake the same kind of obligation to them as we are to our distributors, including Littleton. So it's kind of, defined what we can do and how we do it. Let other people know that if you want water from us, you're going to have a different arrangement. So this agreement is part of that, our ability to plan and to be able to keep the promises that we make, if that makes sense.
I do have a question. Mm-hmm. I understand what you're saying about building out, not annexing forever, but I don't see how you're addressing then providing water for us to build as high as we want.
Well, we can't stop you and have no control at all over land use. But
I mean, it's just, I wasn't really expecting you to answer that now, but it is a question the whole metro area has to address.
But the change in the contract is a change that would only affect an enlargement, a potential enlargement of the combined service area.
No, I know that.
Yeah.
But given the presentation that we just had for the viewers that are watching and so forth.
be afraid, be very afraid, that one.
Yeah. Anyway.
And thank you, Mr. Little, for that. Kelly, could I get you to bring the screen up? Unless, are you using this anymore?
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that we feel we can meet the needs of our combined service area. We have plans to do that.
To become as dense as New York City?
Well, we are starting to bump into the limit of the finite resource that we have here in Colorado. And we're going to have to address that sometime about the population.
I'm just wanting to point that out.
Yeah.
It's a big issue.
Big issue.
That has to be confronted.
Well, and
Definitely. It's population.
obviously this will be gradual. I mean, we're not going to become 3 times denser, overnight. There is a point, for a while, water use in a particular area would go down as density increases because there's less lawn. But then there's a tipping point and you go back where there's more being used. But to the extent it's indoor water use, technologies will change, building types will change. There's a long time where we can all figure out how to address it.
Thank you.
Council, with your indulgence, and if you two would avert your eyes while we talk about this.
Doug?
Yeah.
While you're doing that, can I ask a real quick question? The contractual content with respect to the acre feet, how many homes, I think I saw this at one point, but how many blended residential / commercial properties are served by an acre foot of water?
Well, that's changing over the years. Is it a third of an acre foot?
Use about .46.
Serves,
For a family of four?
so .46.
That's going down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's going down progressively.
For a year,
Yes.
okay. And so just basically out of 1,200, we're talking about roughly 552 homes.
1,200,
Yeah.
or closer to 2,400.
400 homes.
Yeah, it's a factor of two. You're getting two homes for
At half an acre foot for,
Yeah,
for the leased water.
yes.
Oh, it's okay, so it's 1,200 divided by,
Yes,
I got you, okay.
Yeah, so it'd be about, on the leased water, the 1,200.
2,600 homes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Oops. And, gotcha, all right. And then, I'm sure it varies based on location, but for the sake of an argument, an average market value for an acre foot of water on what would hypothetically be the spot market, if I wanted to go buy an acre foot of water, what would it cost?
For one-time use?
Well, I don't know, say recurring use. I
We
mean,
use, what, 12,000?
We use 12,000, but open market, East Cherry Creek, for example, is paying $20,000 plus dollars per acre foot.
So it could be somewhere between $12,000 and $20,000 an acre foot.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so, and that, just again to pick a number, say 15,000 for the sake of an average, is $18 million, roughly speaking, would be sort of a market value for, well, actually, it's more than that, if you say that.
if it were permanent.
If you were acquiring it permanently.
Right, yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, another way to value it is our tap fee, which outside the combined service area tap fee, I should know this,
It's here.
1,400, no. $14,000. Oh,
Or
never
outside.
mind then.
Well, if you say,
Outside the combined service area.
Yeah,
straight math with not a whole lot of art to it, or science for that matter. 1,550 acre feet, if we say the 1,200 plus the 350 times 15,000 an acre foot is roughly $23 million.
but remember that the 1,200 is only available for 5 years.
Well,
5 years.
5 years increments over a 20-year term.
Right.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So, but what it does, and let me speak to that 1,200 acre feet, what the contract says is that Littleton can decide who should receive that water for 5 years and how much of that water they should receive. We, at Denver Water, will have to deal with how much it'll cost and what infrastructure is necessary to get the water there and all that kind of stuff. But this is a pot of water that's available to Littleton to the extent it serves your purposes in whatever you need to do. Whether you annex them, whether you don't annex them, whatever, the 350 is available for land that Littleton annexes that would be served permanently. The 1,200 acre feet is really what I understand that you all would like to have, because you may want to provide, may want to have the ability to have a developer have bridge water to a permanent supply or something, but it's yours to disperse as you wish.
Discretion.
Land.
Discretionary.
To sprinkle as we want. You know, the crux of the contract is a change in the provision that would obligate Denver Water to increase their service area where the city boundaries go. And so that really becomes a question of how much does that potentially impact the city of Littleton. And so if you look at what's the possibility for us to annex, if you look at my technically accurate map, to the east of us is Centennial, and we can't annex to the east of us because we can't annex into another city. To the north of us is Inglewood or Denver. To the west of us is Columbine Valley. There is a section down in here that's unincorporated Jeffco, but that's already served by Denver Water, I believe. I believe they have water districts all along here that get Denver Water. So if we were to decide to annex here, and it's unlikely that we would, but if we were to decide to annex here, this provision in the contract wouldn't affect our ability to annex here. To the south of us is Highlands Ranch, which is served by the Centennial Water and Sanitation District, which means that the area that we would potentially annex directly to the south, and there's not a whole bunch of that, is already provided with water. So the question is how much would the change in this contract impede future council's abilities to do annexations in the city? And the answer is really not much, because the only place that we really have that's left to annex is the areas that would touch us around Chatfield Reservoir. And what's now Trailmark is surrounded, I believe, by Jeffco open space.
Yes, sir.
So we couldn't increase Chatfield Greens, or what's now called Trailmark. What we're really talking about is way to the south of Chatfield Reservoir, going way down there. That's really the only potential area that this provision in the contract would impede Littleton going off and doing any annexations.
Well, and again, it wouldn't impede the annexation itself. It would mean that Littleton would not have
Get the water.
unlimited water that they could offer.
Yes. So the provisions in the contract is the Denver Water would agree, or the contract has a provision that they would provide another 350 acre feet, or expand the combined service area to serve up to another 350 acre feet, however you want to term that.
Well, we would not expand the combined service area.
You would just,
We would
Pledge to-
provide 350 acre feet of water outside the combined service area. And the reason for that is really what you just pointed out, which is except for areas that are actually already in the combined service area, and I think this is the part of Jefferson County you were talking about here.
yes.
That's already in the service area. Any place that Littleton could annex that isn't already in the service area would be so far away that we really couldn't serve it as total service. We couldn't integrate it physically into our existing distribution system. So it's really going to have to be served under a slightly different legal document, but the water would be promised on a permanent basis, if that makes sense.
Yes. So if we did want to go south, for instance, immediately south into Highlands Ranch, which is in theory already served by Centennial Water and Sanitation, this would allow us to bring on another 700 homes at the half acre, which is beyond what I think anybody thinks is going to happen immediately to the south of us between here and Chatfield, or rather to the east of Chatfield and immediately south of here.
And that's roughly about the size of Trailmark.
Yes, Trailmark is about 800
800
homes.
homes, yeah.
And also, just so you'll know, the little strip of land, no man's land right now, that's north of C-470, but south of whatever that is, that's also in the service area.
Okay.
And I understand that's a sort of contiguous to Littleton.
Yes. So the provisions of the contract, to reiterate, the provisions for the terms of the new contract, to reiterate what Jim said, is a payment of $2.1 million over a 2-year period of time. Denver Water would spend up to $400,000 with the Geneva Park water reclamation, transferring that over. What time frame is that, would that happen?
Over the next 5 years.
5 years?
Actually, as soon as we can get it done.
Okay.
David, come up to the mic so they can pick you up on the TV.
Sorry. I think it would be within the next 5 years, but we'd try to get it done as soon as we could, because it's one of the things that's of interest to us also, to get it off potable water.
Okay. And the trade-off is the change in the provision of the contract that would, in theory, obligate Denver Water to provide water to whatever areas it is that we could annex, which are pretty limited based on the geography of the city. So, council, what's your druthers? And I think, Jim?
Well, I've got some questions I want to ask very specific about the contract. Do you want to do this tonight?
Well, are they potential negotiation type questions, or?
They are, and I'm also wondering if we shouldn't have an executive session to add to what you did to talk about this contract later tonight.
Okay. I'm guessing that we're going to want to reach a decision point where we decide to or not to instruct the staff to bring this back as a resolution to approve, if the council wants to go forward with it, that we would have a motion and then instruct the staff to bring this back.
To me, that may make a difference in what we talk about and how we come out of the executive session dealing with this contract.
Okay.
And I have a procedural issue. As I read the charter, we can't do this by resolution because there's more than 2 years contracts for service. Unless no contract for service shall be made by the city for a period longer than 2 years unless authorized by an ordinance that shall not be an emergency ordinance.
Well, there's a specific section in the charter, it's section 106, that says the city council shall have the power to approve and authorize by resolution the entry into a contract or contracts with Denver Water Board of Water Commissioners. So I think that provision voted in 1970, because of its specificity, probably would override any other. I mean, I don't have a problem doing it by ordinance, but there's a specific section of the charter that says it's to be done by a resolution.
Well, the ordinance versus resolution wouldn't cure whatever problem Peggy thinks exists with the charter. But perhaps what we need to do then is go into executive session specifically to talk about the contract, then come back out. If we're going to make a motion, and then continue with the rest of the agenda.
Doug, why wouldn't we go ahead and just do the executive session after the end of our other agenda items tonight and do it at the end when you've already got an executive session call for open space?
I guess we could, but then we're looking at some other meeting directing the staff, unless you want to make that.
And I don't have a problem doing that. You know, the people of this city voted to this contract in the first place, and I think we need to take as much due diligence as we can before we make any changes in this contract. And that's very bothersome to me, because the people voted in the first place. And I don't want to see this go by resolution because of that very fact. As a matter of fact, I might be even pushing to go back to a vote of the people before we change this contract, because it's voted in the first place.
Well, if that's your feeling, then that probably needs to be done out in a public meeting. So if there's technical or negotiation issues, then what I'm going to suggest is that we go into executive session and ask those questions, or figure out what we want to do to negotiate. But I think that the decision on how to go forward probably ought to be done in a public meeting. Jose?
You know, we've been looking at this for quite a while now. I think if we're going to bang heads, we ought to do it right here. I don't see any reason for going into a special session. We've worked at it hard, and I think that the staff has worked at it hard. And my personal feeling is that it's a good contract, and I don't see any reason why we should delay it to another week, and then another week, and another week. It just keeps going on and on.
All right, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I'd make a motion that we continue in our special meeting here, that we discuss whatever has to be discussed in this contract.
Do you want to just move to have the staff bring it and see if that flies?
That'll be fine.
Okay, it's been moved to instruct the staff.
I'll second it.
Wait a minute, he didn't finish stating it. I want to hear what he states.
It's been moved to instruct the staff to bring the contract forward
As,
as a resolution on February 1st, which is our next regular meeting.
I'll second it.
Okay? Discussion. Peggy?
I move to amend that
Okay.
to substitute resolution for ordinance.
You mean ordinance for resolution?
Point of,
However I said that, whatever.
Yes, ma'am, ordinance for resolution.
Thank you.
wait a minute, say that again?
It would be done by ordinance rather than her
Right.
amendment is it would come forward as an ordinance rather than a resolution, which was the original motion.
Okay, and can I ask a point of clarification, or do we want to, you want to second it first?
I'll second that.
All right.
Okay.
So is the intent then to do it from the standpoint of first and second reading with public comment? Is that where you're going?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And are we ready for discussion of that?
Yes, please.
Yes. So Bruce has already clarified one intent there. And the way I'm reading Section 103 in the charter versus 106 is 106 I see as, well, it says, under the terms of which water customers shall receive water service, et cetera. And we're dealing with something larger in terms of the ability to increase the area served, in part. So I see this as a more significant issue that deserves ordinance and the two readings.
Well, we have, the charter describes specific requirements for when we do ordinances.
Yeah, there you go.
And 38 is titled When Required. Thank you, Patricia. Under Article 5 of ordinances, in addition to such acts of the council as are required by general statute or by other provisions of this charter to be by ordinance, every act making an appropriation, authorizing borrowing money, levying tax, establishing any rule or regulation for the violations of which a penalty is imposed, or placing any burden upon or limiting the use of private property shall be by an ordinance. So, strictly,
Then you go to 103.
okay,
It talks about in addition to other places in the charter. And 103 says, "No contract for service shall be made by the city for a period longer than 2 years unless authorized by an ordinance."
That shall not be an emergency ordinance.
Right.
And you have,
And then you go to 106, the last paragraph says, "City council shall have the power to approve and authorize by resolution the entry into a contract or contracts with the Denver Board of Water Commissioners under the terms of which water customers of Littleton shall receive water service," et cetera. I mean, we can, if you want to do the IGA by resolution and the contract by ordinance, we can do both. That'll make everybody happy.
What were they thinking in 1959, Mayor? That's the question.
so there's an IGA in addition to the contract?
Well, we could do an IGA to enter the contract since it's another government. We could put forth the terms of the payments and that sort of thing.
Is there an advantage to doing that as opposed to just wrapping it up into the contract?
You know, the only advantage I see is sometimes years down the road when you're looking at a contract and it has provisions in there that are far outdated. Sometimes those are easier to wrap into the IGA, and then the contract stands alone. But from a practical matter, it doesn't make any difference. But for instance, if you go back and look at the Denver water contract now, it talks about turning over the systems and all of these things that really don't apply anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there can be an advantage to it, but not one that was enough for me to separate them apart.
Okay, further discussion? I guess from a personal viewpoint, I don't see a big disadvantage of going through an ordinance other than the fact that you have 2 weeks between the first and second reading. And I don't consider that to be a huge disadvantage given the amount of time that we spent on this so far. So I will support the amendment. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the amendment which changes the main motion from instructing the staff to bring the contract forward as a resolution to instructing the staff to bring the contract forward as a ordinance. All in favor, raise your hands. So Jose is opposed. It passes a 6-1 vote.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make another amendment to the motion.
Okay?
I think, well, I'll make the amendment, and then I'd like to have the opportunity to speak to it. I move that the ordinance not come before City Council until after it's had an opportunity to be published in the Littleton Report.
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay?
When is the next Littleton report? Not till April, isn't it?
I don't know when it is.
You should receive the February issue in the next couple days, so.
The answer from the Director of Communications was the next report would be out in April.
I think this is one of the most important issues this council will face in our 2-year term. I think it's the most important issue we've faced in the last, I'm now entering multiple terms, of course, my 17th year on City Council, on this City Council, and I think it's the most important issue I have ever had to deal with. It is very disconcerting to me that some terms in this contract that I think need to be negotiated, we need to have that opportunity to do that. Failing that, I think the public ought to have the opportunity to speak to what is in this contract and let them speak as to what they think these terms might be and how it's going to affect the ability of this city to function in the future. So I'd like to see it go to the Littleton Report. We've done that in the past, where we've had very important issues come before us that we said we want to get input from citizens about this. And so I want to have the opportunity for the citizens to speak to us about this contract. And therefore, the only way you really can get the information out is to publish it in the Littleton Report, which goes to every household and every business within the city. And so that's why I made the motion to move it to the next Littleton Report, after the next Littleton Report for the ordinance to be heard.
Further discussion? Bruce?
Jim, I respect your point. I'm not, I guess I'm disinclined to want to wait till April to make that happen. I would be far more inclined to suck up the expense, given the magnitude of the issue, and maybe put a postcard out to inform people that this contract is coming up for discussion. Now, whether that can be done by February 1st or not, I kind of doubt. But I think waiting another 3 months for this to get out in the Littleton report, I'm not going to be able to support that, but I would be willing to go further and sort of say we ought to take extraordinary measures to try to communicate. Let's put it that way.
So I have a question, how much that would cost?
Well, but that's not on the table right now. What's up for consideration is an amendment to the motion to delay, I'm going to say, the first reading of the ordinance until after the next Littleton report is output or put out. Bill?
Just in the whole pace of this, I guess I don't feel as much of a rush. We're dealing with a format of a contract that's been around since 1993, I think is what Patricia mentioned earlier. It wasn't until, I think, March of last year, I think, that Mr. Berry had forwarded something on to the city to say, consider this. And so I guess I don't feel as much of a haste, and I agree that this is something that we want to get in front of the citizens and give them every opportunity to make some comment on this. As was pointed out before, we entered into this contract with actually a vote of the citizens. It wasn't something that was just left to the council, because it was a surrendering of what we had been owning as far as our own water supply. And at least as I've looked at global issues, access to water is one of those things over the next 20 to 50 years that is going to become increasingly important, not just here in Colorado, but across the globe. And I think a 2-month process, because I think we're sending out the Littleton report now, so I guess even for April it would be about 2 months from now. So I don't know if I'd say it is a 3-month effort, so I don't see a problem.
Further discussion or sign language? I guess I have a different perspective than Jim does. I don't consider this to be the most important thing that we will do as a council. I consider this to be pretty much a no-brainer. And frankly, we've been having discussions about annexation to the south of Chatfield for months. It's been in the newspaper. We've had public hearings on it. The council's already voted against annexation to the south. That's not the first time that that issue came before a Littleton City Council. I was on the council in the 90s when that same piece of property, Sterling Ranch, which was basically everything south of Chatfield, came to the council, and the council decided at that point in time not to annex. So the only real provisions that we're changing is the provision of allowing or restricting the obligation to provide water outside of the combined service area where the city will annex. And given the geography of where Littleton is and the possibility of annexation, we're only talking, the only possibility this would affect is south of Chatfield. And we've had very public discussions about that. We've had multiple executive sessions about that. It's been in the newspaper. There's been newspaper articles about this particular contract coming up for renewal. So it's not like this is something that the public isn't aware of what's happening.
But my motion has absolutely nothing to do with annexation at all.
Well, actually,
it has to do with notification of the public.
Yeah. Okay. So, any other discussion? The motion is to amend the main motion to delay the first reading of the ordinance until after the next Littleton report. All in favor, raise your hands. Jim and Phil. Opposed is Jose, Deb, Bruce, and Peggy. Bruce.
So let me follow up then on the next element of that. If we're not going to wait till the next Littleton report, would there be, in conversation, appetite to maybe delay 2 weeks to see if we could get a postcard out to everybody? And for the sake of an argument, if you assume 20,000 postcards at 20 cents a postcard plus printing and paper, it's probably a $6,000 expense.
Kelly, would you like to come to the table and respond to Councilman Stallman and the conversation about getting out some sort of postcard regarding this contract?
Yes.
How's that for a professional response?
Thanks for stopping by.
Whatever you need, you let me know.
No, I think he suggested around $6,000, and I don't know if that's, we've done some total mailings before, so is that at least a ballpark?
I don't recall the bulk mail rate on a postcard off the top of my head, times approximately 19,000 postal patrons. I don't know what it is.
20 cents.
Okay, let's go with 20 cents. I really don't know.
It sounds like it'll be ballparkish.
Okay, so $6,000-7,000 maybe, roughly.
Yes.
Okay. So before making a motion, I mean, let's just talk about it. Is that, I certainly would be willing to go that route, given, I respect Jim's point. I just didn't want to wait, till April, and then 2 weeks into April for the next, or at least 1 week into April for the first council meeting, or first reading, if you will, once the thing comes out.
Peggy?
I want the public to be informed. I'm a strong believer in transparency. But if we go the route of saying we should be mailing postcards so everybody knows about issues at council meetings, then I think we have to do that for lots of issues during the year. I think we have quite a few email databases that operate in this city that we can reach out to the people in ways that I think almost anybody who really follows city council issues, city issues, would be informed. But I could see delaying the first reading of the ordinance to get some time for that to happen, and to get articles in the papers.
Yeah, and if I could address that, I mean, there are other ways that we can communicate that are relatively free. We have our website and our cable channel. I can do a press release and try to get it in the Post and all the other outlets that we use, so
Okay.
that's no problem, and that's
But
free.
we have some social media too that we could
We do.
use, right?
Yeah, we've got all kinds of tools.
Well, I think all of those should be applied. And I think to your point, I can agree that I think just some of the feedback I've had individually on this particular issue raises it to a level of potential citizen interest above most of the things we've done to date. Hence, I see it as being a bit more in Jim's category. I tend to not disagree with Doug either, that it's not like it hasn't been discussed, and it's not like there isn't some information out there, and there's obviously a lot of vehicles to make that happen, so it's more just taking a pulse. I mean, I can throw it out there as a motion if people want to vote on it, or
Why don't you make that?
you want to do that?
Sure. So you're making a motion that we mail postcards to...
Within 2 weeks to the Littleton Report distribution list,
Okay.
and notifying citizens and business owners that this issue is going to come before council. And then we would defer.
How about if we shorten this to, we mail postcards as soon as possible to announce the public hearing?
That's what I meant to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay. Been moved and seconded to mail postcards as soon as possible to announce the public hearing. Discussion? Jim?
Do you need to have the date for when that may be heard because of the times? In other words, a week from tonight is the next regular meeting.
Well, I'm assuming that if this goes forward, we're talking about a public hearing on the, first reading on the 1st, which would put the public hearing and second reading on the 15th, which is 3 weeks from now. So if we got the postcards out in the next 4 or 5 days, that would give probably more than 2 weeks' notice to the public hearing. And traditionally, that's when people would come down and speak anyway.
You think, Kelly, how long is it going to take to drop these things? If we do it.
We'll give Rachel in the print shop a call tonight and put her on alert. We could do it before the 15th.
Well, what we wanted out, though, Kelly, is to hit the streets substantially before the 15th, if that's the hearing date. So, for example, what they're talking about is if they decide to go forward tonight with first reading. Now, first reading, as you know, Council, you could set the public hearing date whenever you wanted. But if it goes forward, if the public hearing is going to be the 15th, I think we'd want to have the postcard at the post office by, the end of the first week in February, so that there's at least, a week to maybe 2 week.
So can you get in the mail the next week?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yes.
Okay.
So then we'd say,
Mr. Mayor?
How come she never says yes to me like that?
We have just been through a whole lot with the budget, and as far as I'm concerned, this is an item that's come up right now, and you people yourself have all been in the budget session. You've been cutting every damn thing that we can possibly do, and now you say, we got to get a card out. I can tell you, but by tomorrow, everybody in town will know what's happening here, because it comes out in the papers, it comes out through the television, it comes out through all of our news media. And I just don't think that I would vote to spend any money for that right now.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the interested parties are very well aware of what's happening right now. Any other discussion? The motion is to mail postcards as soon as possible to announce the public hearing. This amends the main motion. All in favor, raise your hands. So that's Jim, Phil, and Bruce. Opposed is Doug, Deb, Peggy, and Jose. Okay. Any other motions? Okay, we're back to the main motion, which is to instruct the staff to bring us the contract forward as an ordinance
Yes, sir.
for first reading on the 1st of February. All in favor, raise your hands. So that's opposed. Okay, so that's 5-2 with Jim and Phil being opposed. All right, thank you. We appreciate it.
Patty, David, thank you. Appreciate it.
anytime you want to talk about this
All right.
more or other things, you have to.
Any questions, please let us know.
All right, thank you for coming down.
And, Mr. Mayor, would we need a motion to instruct staff to engage all the various media that we have to announce this, including something on the homepage on the website?
I don't really think you need a motion to do that.
I think
Okay.
Dr. Cole,
Kelly,
we fully
Okay.
understand. I think we would
But no,
ramp
it's okay.
up-
I just-
Yes, ma'am, we'd
yeah.
ramp up our full website, social media,
Okay, that's just,
full machine.
Yeah,
Yes,
and-
ma'am.
and
We certainly understand the intent of council on this.
thank you.
Okay, folks, that brings us to our 8 o'clock item,
It's 8 o'clock somewhere.
which is a discussion about the library director.
Just a couple of quick comments. Unfortunately, Phil Cortese is home tonight with a very, very bad cold, but this is something that he and Eric Von Savage, our HR director, have been talking about, as all of you know, with Marjorie Smith's retirement. We have looked at all of our departments as changes have occurred. The decision we've made, and we wanted to just give you a courtesy briefing on it tonight, and certainly because we have boards and commissions with these two facilities, but we're going to appoint, I'm going to appoint Tim Nims as acting director of the Bemis Library for a period of 2 years. I wanted to discuss that a little bit because as council knows, with the cost containment that we've been under for this past 3 or 4 years, every opportunity that we've had to look at, can we do things in a different way? Can we do things more efficiently? Can we look at a different structure? We've taken the opportunity to do that. And in talking about this, we looked at some other organizations around not only the country but the state where there have been combined management structures. Some are called cultural affairs divisions, some are called other kinds of things. But given our circumstances where the library and the museum are in a very close physical proximity to each other, we have a single branch library. We don't have a multiple branch library like Arapahoe, which maybe has 8 or 9. I can't remember what they're at with now, but certainly I think at least 8 branches. The idea of perhaps consolidating the management seemed to have some merit to explore. Tim Nims, our museum director, said he was willing to attempt that. And so, as we said, as Phil said in his memo, this is a trial period. I think most of you know that the staff, Phil and Tim, and Eric Von Savage, are doing an efficiency study, a real look at the library. Phyllis Larison, who's our current acting director, and I think she could attest that the entire library team is very engaged in this process of looking at the technology, looking at how they do business. I've met with some of the library people. For the ones I've talked to, Phyllis seemed to be very excited about some of the work that's going on. That will be finished later this year. So we just think the timing is opportune to take a look to, if we put Tim in there as acting, it gives a chance for some things to coalesce. It gives a chance to finish the efficiency study. It gives us a chance to try how a consolidated management structure might work. And the idea of it being a trial period is if we were to get down the road 6 months or a year and start running into issues, then obviously we could always go back to a more traditional structure. But my feeling is if we could put into place a management structure that provides the same level of service that the citizens are getting now and perhaps save the citizens $100,000 a year in tax money, then it's an opportunity that we should explore. And so, but certainly our intent would be, Dr. Cole, I'll get right to you, our intent would be to use this as a sounding board to solicit input from all 3 boards, really, because the library board, the museum board, and the Fine Arts Commission are all involved with this management structure. So our intent would be to solicit feedback from your citizen boards, solicit feedback from the professional staff that's involved, also solicit feedback, obviously, from the citizens who utilize these. As you know, these are 2 of our most popular facilities. Both the library and the museum had record patron visits, so these are 2 very heavily used, very popular facilities, and we would be looking for feedback from citizens. Does the service level, programming, the quality of these institutions seem to be maintaining at their level under a consolidated management structure. So we would certainly be listening to the community, but given what we think will be continuing financial constraints, we think it's prudent to give this a try on a trial basis. And again, I'm sorry that Phil is not here. He's very ill, but I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
And
yes, ma'am.
When you started speaking, you said you're appointing for 2 years, I believe.
I said for up to.
No, I think you actually said, and I just wanted to clarify.
Well, if I did, I misspoke.
That's why I went, because
Yes,
in the memo to us, and then as you continued speaking, I think you made it clear this is a trial period and not just 2 years.
That's right. If we got 6 months from now and, the place is falling apart and people are leaving and patrons are leaving and the staff is unhappy and we're about to have an insurrection, then I just tell Tim to go back to the museum.
Go back to the farm, huh?
Go back to the farm, yeah. Yeah, so, if we were to get down the, or if we got down the road, let's say a year, but what I'm thinking about is, going through to let the efficiency plan get in place, go through a budget process. So really, we're thinking about a year, but the other year is just to give us a little extra time. But if we got either way, if it was obvious that it was not working, we wouldn't just continue and say we're going to go 2 years no matter what. If it was successful and everybody was pleased with it and we're getting positive feedback from everybody, then we might sort it out. So that's just an estimated period. Thank you for clarifying that.
And then you said maintaining service level, and you referred to the efficiency study. I think this would be a great time to see whether or not citizens want, if all citizens' needs are being met right now. And since I volunteer at the library, I hear a lot of things from people who actually use the library, and at least the ones that talk to me in the library seem really, really happy. More recently, I've heard from people who apparently stopped using the library, I don't know how long ago, and they say, oh, it doesn't do this, or it doesn't do that, or they used to do this and they don't anymore. I would suggest, if we can, to have the Littleton Report have a survey of some sort of the citizens for the library and the museum to get a sense of whether or not we're meeting their desires. Since we're doing the efficiency study,
I think
that's
a council decision that perhaps could be applied. As Councilman Trujillo said, you just went through a very excruciating budget process, and we are not doing some things in 2011 that we were doing in 2010. A real quick example is the police department is not going to support the National Night Out program this next year. So that'll be kind of a council discussion if you want to survey two particular sets of services, or whether you want to kind of look at, say, the 2012 budget. What kind of feedback are you getting across your services in terms of the police department or whatever? But certainly if council directs us to specifically try to monitor those level of services in terms of the satisfaction level of actually increasing it, that's something I'd be looking to as a majority of council to give us that direction. So leave that to your discretion.
Bruce?
Yeah, I want to commend staff. I think this is a real creative idea under the circumstances in terms of looking at ideas to, it's out of the box thinking. And notwithstanding, I'm convinced the underlying motivation for Tim is a naked power grab. I still think that he's well qualified. I think he's a strong manager, and personally, I have every confidence in him.
Comes with his Kansas roots.
Well, see, there you go. But
I think it gives him more walls to display.
Well, it's the whole realpolitik thing. But no, I have every confidence in his ability to effectively lead both teams, and I think he's the right man for the job.
say,
Debbie agrees.
I'd say ditto on that. I think as well, it's a way to look at, what do we have going for us, and I think, given the efficiency study, who knows what necessarily comes out of that, and it gives it an opportunity to not necessarily constrain someone's hands if they would be stepping in the middle of that as well. So.
Okay.
Anything else?
Who's in charge? Who's in charge?
Tim Nims will be the acting director.
Right?
And
Acting director, but you have somebody there that's...
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Phil, I'm sorry. I said in my memo, well, I guess I didn't say, but Phyllis, we anticipate Phyllis will continue to, in her current role as deputy director. So, thank you for clarifying that, Jose. Appreciate that, yes. And that would be, I think, the management plan that we've discussed with Tim is that you've got Lorena Donahue, deputy director at the museum. Phyllis will continue to operate in her current role, or go back to her current role as deputy director in the library. So thank you for asking that question.
Ready? Peggy.
Yes. Given the fact that when we had the police study, citizens did have opportunity to comment during that process. When we did the fire study, directly or indirectly, we collected data directly from citizens. When we tried the experiment at Trailmark, we assessed that. So I do think it's important to get some citizen input, since we're still in the process of doing this study, efficiency study on the library. So I've got to say that before I don't get a second for my motion. I would like council to direct staff to do a survey of the library and museum in terms of meeting citizens' needs. And I don't want to go into details on some of what I think on that, but perhaps if we pass this, the two boards independently might have some suggestions on that.
Okay, it's been moved to direct the staff to do a survey for the library and the museum. Is there a second?
Second that.
Okay.
In the Littleton report, did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Jose.
You mentioned that the police, what were you talking about? When you were saying the police, there was no input?
No, when the accreditation team came for the reaccreditation, there was citizen input. I remember I probably felt that night maybe the way Phil Cortez feels tonight, but I did go. I didn't speak, but I remember Jim Taylor was one of the ones who commented, giving input, about that service.
So that was the national accreditation?
Yeah. They haven't.
Most generally, that would be taken care of in the police department as far as whatever has to happen there. I don't know if the citizens would really be that interested in that portion of it. But it seems to me that for them to get accredited, it has to go through a process within the police department.
Yeah,
and
and
it
that's,
all falls right into that general area.
yes, but the accreditation team wanted to input from citizens when they came, and that was over at the courthouse where that input was provided. But we're not doing accreditation of the library. We're just doing the efficiency study, which is looking at ways to make the services more efficient. My issue in part is, are we missing some things that a lot of citizens would like us to be doing? Not are we making the ones happy that are already using the library. So it seems to me it's not a real expensive thing to give the citizens an opportunity to to give feedback about that.
Bruce?
I respect your motivation on this. I guess I'm probably not inclined to go along with it by virtue of the fact that I think the quality of the survey ends up being predicated on the nature of the questions that you're asking, and I think there's a pretty broad body of industry knowledge out there as far as what libraries are doing to meet the needs of customers over a broad spectrum. I think they've got the efficiency study going, they got a management change going on, the patron visits have all been up over an extended period of time. I'm not entirely sure they've got the bandwidth to deal with it right now, and I think they can probably get a pretty good sense of what needs to happen based on what is industry standard at this point in time. So, like I said, I appreciate your point. I think it's probably at this juncture maybe not great timing.
Similarly, love the thought in reaching out to the citizens and doing that whenever we can in different ways. We have 3 boards, Fine Arts, Museum, and Library, and I might encourage them to say, you know, what are ways that we might be able to reach out. There are groups that will absolutely struggle to try and get a response rate that provides a credible response in doing a survey, even when it's well constructed. We talked earlier about putting something together and you know, putting together a survey. You can touch base with the city of Centennial that did a survey last year in theirs, and they spent a lot more than what we talked about in trying to design a survey that can provide credible response. Having been involved in both mail and phone survey approaches, as well as various live, whether you want to call them focus group approaches, as much as I love the Littleton report, using that as a mechanism to say, okay, in addition to everything else that's news here, we want you to respond, would be something I wouldn't support.
Further discussion? Okay, the motion is to direct staff to do a survey for library and museum. All in favor, please raise your hand. Peggy and Jim. Opposed is everyone else, so it fails on a 2-5 vote. Okay, anything else on the library director?
Thank you for the feedback, Council.
Okay, it brings us to the added item, which is a discussion on certificates of participation. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Jose stole my thunder a little bit, so I'm giving credit where credit is due here. I think your comments about the budget issues we've all just been through are very pertinent, and certainly the opportunity to seek incremental sources of revenue where getting them is relatively straightforward and easy to accomplish is something we should consider. We did talk about doing the certificates of participation refinancing back last spring and summer, and of principal concern was the timing vis-a-vis the November election and Amendments 60, 61, and 101. Those issues having been resolved, I sent a note to Finance Director Doug Farman just asking him whether the economics of doing the refinance at this point in time were still compelling, and in layman's terms, he basically wrote back in so many words, it's maybe sort of still is, it's sort of close, we could probably save, I think he said something on the order of $5,000 to $8,000 each year until 2024, which isn't as robust as it was previously, but to Jose's very compelling point, any sort of incremental budget pickup is certainly a good thing at this juncture, given the position we're in and what we've just experienced with the cuts. as a result, I would also, I guess I'd also acknowledge, I understand some of the conversation we had last time and the mayor's point about some of the issues concerning the nature of the legal documentation and so forth and so on. And admittedly, it's not the easiest material to get through, but it does appear at this juncture to be well sanctioned within law. There are experts and people who do this for a living, and I think all things considered, the scales tip to our ability to pick up some incremental cash flow and generate some incremental revenue in a very brutal budget environment is probably the point that weighs more heavily. And as a result, I wanted to bring this back to people to see if we might give direction to staff to pursue doing the refinance, restart the refinance consideration again at this point in time.
Do we have any idea of what the cost would be to get the analysis done, as to try to come up with what our savings might be?
He said Doug Farman said the net savings were a net present value of $55,000, which included all of the costs. And that's where the $5,000 to $8,000 a year was net of all of that.
And if there is, if it comes less savings than that, where's the break point, whether it's worth it to go forward or not?
Yeah, I think we're sort of to that point. Doug, in fact, the memo, he said the industry standard for judging whether or not to refinance is about 2.5% to 3% savings. He calculated we were in the vicinity of 2.27, so it would be very close. He said the city would also have to obtain bond ratings since the last rating is stale, so we'd have to stay or improve on the AA- rating. So I think given where interest rates are, there's a rapidly closing window that if we're going to do it, we probably need to do it sooner than later. And I would ask, staff to come back and verify for us that there's enough savings there to warrant pulling the trigger on it.
Having gone through some of this, I think the cost of actually, on our side of going through the analysis is relatively small. It's going to be some of Doug's time, but it does, our bond counsel and that are the folks that do the work, but this is what they get paid for on that side. And I know that interest rates may stagnate for a while or could change and actually might go up or down depending on QE2 and what happens. The other part that is on the closing the window is any time you move closer to the full maturity, the opportunity to reap a benefit in the change in interest rates diminishes. And so the longer we would wait, even with or without any interest rate change, starts to diminish the opportunity to have a positive impact or the degree of the positive impact that we might have. So I'd support taking a look at it at this point in time. And now that 60, 61 and Proposition 101 have been settled, I think we're in an environment where dollars are hard to come by, and this gives us, and on that 55,000, actually, my recollection and the sequencing of that is more of that is front-ended.
That was my recollection, too.
The first 2 years are going to yield a disproportionately larger amount. And so we're talking about potential positive cash flow impacts in 2011 and 2012.
You want to make a motion?
Make a motion
Sure.
to direct staff to reconsider and bring to council a revised plan to refinance the certificates of participation.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved to direct staff to bring forth a refinance for certificates of participation.
Bruce, could I ask you, on what certificates of participation are you asking about? We have
Right.
participation certificates at the courthouse, and we have them at the museum.
I think it's the courthouse, if memory serves. It was the 2024s. So I think it's just those, because I think the ones on the museum the term is so short, it's not worth doing. So I think it's just the courthouse.
We can't do the museum yet.
Was
Yeah,
that
the
what it was?
museum, I can't recall, but there is some sort of limitation on the museum. Suzanne is right. I don't recall the particulars, but I know the one they've looked at is the courthouse.
Right.
We've got how much time left on that? What is it right now?
2024.
It's 13 years.
13 years? My personal feeling is that by the time you look at this and figure out what interest you're going to make and the amount you're going to pay for this thing, it's just not worth it at this time. We've been making those payments, and for the little bit that we make, and we're not guaranteed anything on interest right now, and I doubt that this year is going to see a great rise of interest or next year. We're still in that recession. So it bothers me to even think about something like that.
Further discussion?
Well, just to balance off Jose's comment a little bit, Jose, on that, which is we're talking real dollars, and earlier we were arguing about some pretty small amounts. This is something that's larger than any one of those, and it's the analysis would show us at least whether we're going to have sufficient savings to go forward. It's certainly not going to be in a position that it costs us to take a look at it, and I appreciate some of the thought on that. There's not that much time left, but there is 13 years, and this can produce some real savings for the taxpayers.
I have a question. Does it cost us to look at the cost?
How far you get? I think our first payment last time had to do with the bond rating,
Yeah, and
and it was about
There's,
$5,000.
there is a point where you commit to some professional time, and I don't remember, but Suzanne's right. So it's kind of how far down the road. If you wanted to, I don't know, did Doug Farman send his memo out to everybody?
I think so.
Okay, so, but we could check with you on if there's a trigger point where we incur some professional costs.
Well, I think this was from the plan standpoint. I think it's coming back to council to sort of say this makes sense. To actually proceed,
Yeah.
you'd have to vote on executing, and then there would be money that would spend in anticipation of doing the refi.
Yeah, and I think it was $5,000 to get the bond rating. And the
Yeah.
problem was you don't really know how much you save until you get the bond rating.
But I think it sounded like he could make some educated guesses based on they've been around the block on this enough.
Yeah, and I think where Mr. Farman was after was before we invest the staff time, because we are in, we're in audit season here. We're moving into, the auditors are coming and those kinds of things. But he just wanted to make sure council was even interested in taking a fresh look at this before he burned up any staff time on it.
But it might be to our advantage to discuss this on next Tuesday night, when he could come and...
Mr. Farman could be there, sure.
That would only be a week delay.
If that's a better comfort level, I mean, you've got the motion on the table, but certainly we could make Mr. Farman available.
I guess my personal feeling is certificates of participation are legal. They've been around since, I think, the 20s, if I remember right. However, after reading the contract and seeing what the stuff is, there'd have to be a bigger spread. I mean, since this is actually below what the industry standard is, slightly below, I personally don't feel comfortable with that minimal amount of savings spread over that period of time to wade through the muck that is a certificate of participation. So at this point in time, I'm going to be voting no.
I guess I'll point out one additional item, which is some folks have gone through refinancing and not had to go through a bond rating by using private sources for the refi. And there might be an opportunity to actually improve the savings amount by going to other sources in the refi. that Doug may not have looked at yet.
Okay. Any other discussion? The motion is, Peggy?
Yes, I would move to table this until Tuesday night's meeting so that we could have some conversation with Mr. Farman.
It's been moved to postpone this until February 1st. Is there a second on that?
I don't think you have to have a second for table, do you?
But no discussion, I think.
The discussion is limited, generally speaking, to the date that you're tabling it to. Dies for lack of a second. We're back to the main motion to direct staff to bring forth a refinance for the certificate of participation. Bruce?
And I think from your standpoint, certainly, I think Doug Farman's going to be able to fairly quickly get his head around whether it's worth doing. And I think if there are certain questions that need to be asked or brought up, there's nothing that says we can't ask those after he does a little more digging. I think at this juncture, it's just revisiting it as well from the standpoint of saying, is there enough there to make it worth the while? I mean, Doug may be right. It may be skinny enough at this point, depending on what interest rates are doing. But on the other hand, I don't think we're out a lot of bandwidth or time or money for having staff take another run at this. I think they've got most of the models built, and it's making some phone calls and trying to sort of, summarize the whole thing so we can digest it.
Okay, any other discussion? The motion is to direct the staff to bring forth a refinance for the cops. All in favor, raise your hands. Okay, that's Peggy, Bruce, Jim, and Phil. Opposed is Deb, Jose, and I. So it wins on 5-4-3. Now that I got my math straight. Okay. That brings us to the next item, which is motion for an executive session to instruct negotiators for a possible land acquisition. Phil.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the City Council convene an executive session pursuant to CRS Section A to discuss possible land acquisition, particularly with regard open space. And included in this would be the city attorney as well as the city manager.
And Mr. Bloston.
Yeah, we might as well throw
Public
in
Services Director.
Public Services Director, Mr. Bloston.
Okay. I'll second that. Jim?
Here we go.
Is this a critical issue that we need to be talking about tonight?
It's probably yes. And we were going to talk about it last week, but the meeting went long last week. In fact, we have 2 items stacked for executive session, both on similar subjects that we didn't get to last week. So any other discussion? This takes 5 votes. All in favor of the executive session, raise your hands. Opposed? Jim? If it wasn't you, it might be Jose. All right, let's, wow. Building conference room?
Yes, sir.
Is 5 minutes a long enough break for everybody? Okay.
Thank you.
I think we have a tape in there. Thing set up in there.
Oh, I completely spaced that.